Thank God.
Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. I've got Perry Knoppert here, and he is the founder of the Octopus Movement. He is in the Netherlands right now. I'm in Buenos Aires, and we're going to get into a bunch of strange facts on octopus, I imagine, but also a bunch of ADD, other topics. Welcome to the show.
Yoo-hoo! Thank you, Stewart. I'm already looking forward to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so curious what you're gonna ask me. I'm so curious where this is going to
Well,
go.
what is the craziest thing you've learned about octopi recently?
That they used to have bones and shells. How about that? Very, 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 very long time ago, they used to have bones and shells, and they decided to get rid of that stuff. And in the beginning, it was very difficult, but in the end, it served them well. How cool is that?
Yeah.
I wish we could learn from that. That not that we're removing our bones or whatever, but it would be nice to remove something that we really think is really necessary for us, and let's get rid of it and see what happens. I'm all in for that. How cool
Well,
would that be?
well, I think it's happening. I think that's what's happening to our species right now with the AI stuff. It's definitely forcing me, particularly in the last week or 2 weeks, to really reframe specifically how I understand programming, because I have been trying to learn how to program for 10 years and it never clicked. And now, in the past week or two, because of a tool that Anthropic released, I am now coding applications on my own in natural language in English. It goes off and does all the coding and everything like that. And so, but then it's not only that. There's a bunch of other things that are like it feels like the octopus movement, the octopus name is actually a really good term for where we're headed, right? Like, what does that bring up?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
Well, it all started when I asked a bunch of people, like I was looking for a symbol of a curious misfit. So I'm very interested in the weirdos on this planet and the people that don't fit in the box. And I was interviewing them, and the thing they all have in common, what we all have in common, is that we're curious misfits. And and I was looking for language for that. Like, what is a curious misfit? What combines everything towards the curious misfit? And then someone said, "Oh no, I always this was Christine in London. I will never forget this." She said, "Perry, I says, what do you think of a symbol of a curious misfit?" And her response was, "I always send an octopus emoji if I had a fun conversation with someone," which is the best nonlinear answer you can imagine, right? So, what is the symbol? And then I get the answer like, I used to send this emoji to someone if I had a fun conversation. And I remember receiving an emoji from her as well before the interview that I did with her. And I asked my kids, I said, "Guys, I'm receiving an octopus emoji. What the hell does that mean? Am I being old here? Am I missing something?" And I had to look it up, and my kids were laughing like, "No, Dad, that doesn't mean anything. You're fine." Oh, okay. So that's where it started. And then someone else said, "Have you seen My Octopus Teacher? This amazing documentary. It's on Netflix. It
Oh,
won an Oscar as a documentary, and it's about it's about this filmmaker who gets into a burnout and goes home to South Africa, and as a treatment for his well-being, for his mental health, he goes swimming in the ocean every day. It's freezing cold, and he goes diving without equipment, and he goes into the water to to quiet his mind, right? If you dive without any equipment, you go underwater, it
oh,
shuts up the brain. It's fantastic. And he ran into this octopus, and they became buddies, friends. He would visit this octopus every day, film it, and that's the octopus teacher. It is the best in so many ways. We all love the Matrix, and there are hidden clues in the Matrix, and the Matrix is awesome. Look at the My Octopus Teacher. It's even better than the Matrix. No, I'm not saying this, but it's really cool because that octopus. Also, people are saying that the octopus is an alien, right? That is
ooh.
his DNA is totally different from all other
Totally.
animals, and is it like octopuses are aliens? It's the octopus is so awesome. Everything comes together with the octopus. Three hearts, nine brains, eight arms. Who doesn't want to be called three hearts, nine brains, eight arms, right? And when you have suckers then your life is so much better. It's who doesn't want to have suckers?
There's this great book I read about an octopus a long time ago, and I can't remember it, and I can't remember all the details, but I remember being blown away, as I imagine you are, from these strange animals. But one of my favorite anecdotes is that the scientists studying the octopus realized that maybe it's a video I saw, that the octopus can hit a fish out of spite. I don't know how they, I
Slap
don't,
him.
yeah,
Slap him in the face.
how do they know it's out of spite?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
9 brains, maybe with their 9 brains and their neurons everywhere. I don't know.
And oh, that's it. That's it. Because it's a decentralized nervous system. Because we
Mhm.
have a very centralized nervous system with our brain and our spinal cord and then the nerves going out. But they have a whole bunch of different brains inside of an octopus. Uh, let's go into neurodivergence and how it ties into AI. I can't stop myself from talking about AI. How does what do you think? What is the relationship between nonlinear thinking, neurodivergence, and AI in your own
Okay.
life or in people that you've seen interacted with?
First of all, I think AI is beautiful product of the linear world, right?
Mm.
It is. So the laws of thought by Boyle in 1815,
Whoa.
right? It's the computer language. It's the laws of thought. I love the laws of thought.
Whoa.
The sentence by itself is already so cool. So the ones and the zeros is based on that. It's the
Whoa.
laws of thinking, the laws of thought. And in my opinion, I want to say too many things. So this is
Go
very
for it.
difficult.
This happens here. Yeah.
Linear thinking is thinking, right? There's just thinking, and it's conditioned, and it's organized, and therefore the only thing we do is invent. We don't create because the creation is separate from thinking.
Hmm.
Then there's nonlinear thinking, which is in the space between thoughts. That's how I see it. So the space between thoughts is like a black hole in your mind. It's
Hmm.
emptiness. And there is the nonlinear thinking, and that's a vacuum where creativity bursts out. You know, it cannot be linked to thoughts because then it's just innovation. And innovation is awesome, but it's a creation based on knowledge. Now, let's go to neurodiversity. A lot of people thrive very well in the linear system
Hmm.
to have everything under control. Why? Why do they thrive well in that system? It's because most humans find their own mind a bit scary, to say
Hmm.
the least.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this area of your own thinking, which is ridiculous, why can your own thinking be scary? But okay, most people suffer from that.
Hmm.
So they don't know how they will respond when something happens that they're not in control of. So they're against chaos in their lives. So they prefer systems so they know what will happen next week, next month, next year. And that's why they're in this kind of modern slavery, like they're tight underwear, everything is under control, as long as they don't have to go into their minds because they don't know how they're going to respond. And now we're going to neurodiversity. These weird fuckers have always heard in their lives that they're strange.
Yeah.
I'm strange. You know, I have dyslexia, ADHD, and I'm somewhere on the spectrum. So Perry's weird. Perry's always been weird. It's always been difficult at school. And and dyslexia, that's not a party. Really, it's not. And people that are saying it's a superpower, fuck off. It's not. It's very annoying. But what happens is that since I was a tiny little boy, people were saying this is wrong, this is wrong.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
I've kept thinking, what's wrong? I'm different. What's wrong with me? There's something very cool there, and I didn't realize that. By thinking on an early age already, what's wrong with me? It allowed me to go into my own mental state of being. I was searching, I was curious. That's why there are all these curious
Hmm.
misfits. They're curious into their own minds. If you're constantly been told that you're weird and that there's something wrong with you you believe that and you start questioning yourself. Everybody does that, right? And you're thinking, but what is this? So you get very curious about your own mind. What is the benefit of being curious about your own mind? Is that you know how you're going to respond to difficult situations. What is the benefit out of that is that they can allow chaos to be in their lives.
Mm.
I 4 years ago I gave everything away, I became homeless, and like that's being a rebel inwardly. Not so nobody is a rebel inwardly. They don't do that. Everybody's a rebel to the outside world, right? Telling people that they're wrong, and everybody is an easy rebel. Nobody is the difficult rebel. Be a rebel to yourself inwardly. Nobody will do that. But if you can allow that chaos to be there, it allows you to be more in a nonlinear space because you don't have to be in control. You can be in the space between thoughts and you can explore more. So you see that a lot of neurodivergent thinkers are very nonlinear and are very creative and can see things that other people cannot see. And now with AI,
Mm.
AI is very linear. So AI is the invention of thought.
Mm.
That's cool. So everything that is linked to thinking and systems and organizing things and the creation of innovation is awesome with AI. The other side is human intelligence, where there is something that is not linked to thought. So the most beautiful thing of a human being
Yeah.
is love. Everybody knows this. You fall in love. There's no thinking whatsoever involved with true love. And that's what humans can do. And that same love you can recognize in someone's handwriting. You can recognize that in someone playing music. You can recognize that in all kinds of art forms. That's human intelligence. So the neurodivergent thinker is very capable in exploring and utilizing and using their own human intelligence. For now, it has always been difficult because the whole world was wearing tight underwear and saying, no, we need to be in line and in systems and we need to organize everything because otherwise we're not in control. But that's now been taken care of AI. So we can let go of organizing the systems because we have done it. We have mastered the system. It's AI. It's well organized. So now we can go back into human intelligence. So the neurodivergent world, whatever that may be, because we can have a big question mark about neurodiversity because that's created out of thought. Neurodiversity is an invention. Neurodiversity isn't real. It doesn't exist. Oh dear, don't send me emails. I mean, it's it's so weird because if you get tested for ADHD and then you get the result and Perry, congratulations, you have ADHD. Fine, okay. But where was I before the test? Was I someone else? Was there some when I wasn't tested for ADHD? I didn't have ADHD. What the hell? I was still the same person. So it doesn't exist. It's just there, and the diversity of the mind is there for everyone. So but if you can allow that weirdness and chaos, you can be very, very rich in the space of human intelligence.
Yeah.
Yay. So that's how I see it,
It's a
Stuart.
great connection, and it's very clear. There's a lot of different questions I have from that, but the biggest one that keeps on coming to my mind is, so you said that dyslexia is not a superpower. Is ADD a superpower? And what's the difference between the two in terms of that felt experience of like being blocked by this thing? Because I definitely have blocks before, and as you said, they're not real. They're just helpers. They're helpers to identify a sort of pattern, but they don't exist outside of that pattern that we've sort of forced the thing in. What is ADD a superpower, or what is the deal with ADD?
What is a superpower? So it's something, uh, is a superpower something you can do and not a lot of other people can do?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but is that the case with ADD or ADHD or dyslexia? There's so many people that have a dyslexic mind. It's is it then a superpower? I don't think so. Of course, I have this. I like to use the example of dyslexia because that makes it easier for me. So with dyslexia, if I go into a data sheet, I see connections easily. You know,
Mm.
I connect the dots very easily because of my dyslexia.
Mm.
Or, but this is so linear, you know, oh, he has dyslexia, so he's good in this. But can it
Yeah.
is that the case? Is it thanks to dyslexia or is there something else going on? Is
Yeah.
is it not thanks to dyslexia, but connecting these dots and a dyslexic mind are often in a pair. It's happening at the same time. It's not because of dyslexia. And also, I say this many times in the space of autism. Now I'm going to offend a lot of people as well, but it's the same with autism. Having an I have always difficulty with language. I'm Dutch. This is not
Yeah.
my first language. So if I say when you're autistic, maybe I offend people. I'm sorry. But I always say being autistic doesn't mean you need to be a prick, right? It's what the
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah.
It's we're so
Yeah.
conditioned
Yeah.
in our minds, we cannot let go. We cannot drop out of the laws of thought, how I call that. We
Yeah.
cannot remove ourselves from that. So is there a superpower?
Who knows? It's
What the
yeah,
hell?
yeah. We got to
No.
go into what a superpower is, and yeah, it's like it's very a difficult space to unwind because I at the moment I can't really say like what is a superpower because it feels like the ADD is superpower. I've used it many times. ADD is superpower. It's a reaction to having those tests when I was younger and just being like, oh, okay, no, I'm going to convert this thing into a superpower because they've told us a weakness basically, but it's still within this sort of linear thought space that doesn't really help us very much as we're getting to the truth. Yeah, go for it.
And Stewart, if we could fly, you know, can you imagine you and I, we were the only humans that were be able to fly. That's a superpower, right? And that's very positive and whee, here we go. That's cool. But then we're talking about superpowers with neurodiversity and neurodiversity. That's not funny. It's
Yeah,
really not funny to
it's
have neurodiversity, but it's only not funny because the linear world created neurodiversity, explain why things are going wrong. So if you remove that, then the whole issue of superpower is off the table because then it's not annoying anymore. I cannot read and write well. Who cares? Especially not with AI these days. So what are we talking about?
are
You
you
know, there's
are
only
you talking
superpowers, there is another side.
have you figured out a way to talk with the AI in your natural voice? Is that how you're interacting with it most?
I love writing. I
Mm.
love writing. And this has been destroyed in my life because teachers were always saying you cannot write. I love writing. I love language. So what I do now is I write down whatever I want to write down, and then I go to AI and say, okay, make sure there are no stupid
Yeah.
dyslectic
Yeah.
mistakes in
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Remove that.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking to make sure I sound like whatever great writer there is. You know, it's not about that. It's make sure I'm not making a complete fool of myself. And then and that works so well. And now everybody is like, oh, it's so cool what you're writing. I'm thinking,
Yes.
I've always been writing this way, but now you can
Yeah.
read it.
Yeah. This gets into a really interesting territory because the if we go back into history, we can look at the written word. The written word was something only scribes really paid attention to. Scribes and kings and monks for thousands of years. Like that was the audience for which the written word. And people had Bibles and they would read Bibles together as a group, not individuals. And then all of a sudden the printing press came, and the printing press came. And once that came around, then everybody slowly, by the time in the 1800s, started to read the newspaper with their morning coffee instead of reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And then we have our education systems. We have the Prussian model and all these different education systems, all getting us to write in a specific way. But that era of centralization, when it led to writing, is only in the last 100, 200 years. Like it's not something that we're really like fit for. And I probably have a very similar experience to you when I was younger. It's just like everybody's telling me I was doing it wrong, and like it's useless now. It's totally over. Like that feels like that period of human history is going to change massively, particularly in the written word because of AI.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh yes. Oh yes. And well, and it's time to, right? Everybody's talking about education. Sorry, you're saying a bunch of cool things, and education pops up to
Yeah.
my mind like, yes, education. Because what I've noticed that a lot of people are talking about education, like we need something needs to happen in
Yeah.
education, and nothing is happening,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know why. Well, I have my theories about why, but let's not go into that. I think AI is going to
Hmm.
massively
Yes.
change the educational system. And I hope that what the change will be is that the outside world will come into the classroom rather than everything based on thoughts and repeating. So there are
Oh,
thoughts on paper, and then you need to repeat the thoughts that are on paper. If you do that well, you succeed. You get you understand why the thoughts are on the paper, and you reproduce that, and you understand why it's there in the book and that concept. But I hope education, because we can skip that now with AI,
yeah.
right? So I hope education is going to be about bringing the world into the classroom and teaching these kids what's happening in the world and what's happening in their own world. I'm always amazed why at school, at education, it's not about how your brain works. Why do we think what we think?
Standard. Yeah.
Nobody talks about that shit, right? We all have to discover that ourselves. Some go nuts, go crazy, some
Yeah.
make horrible mistakes,
Mm.
and it's you know that 80% of the people in prison have neurodiversity, by the
Mm.
way, talking
Mm.
about bad decisions, talking
Mm.
about not understanding your own thinking, talking about allowing chaos in your life, and then it goes into the wrong path. So I'm very positive, very hopeful that because of AI, something will definitely happen in the educational space where we're going to look differently at language and writing and papers. And, you know, these are thoughts, these are innovations. Okay, let's now go into a different space where we can start learning to really create, not reproduce, but teach children and accomplish children and
Mm.
I can't find the word, but help them to create something based on their own
Mm.
human intelligence
Mm.
rather than this is way. I remember so well in the arts department on the international school where my kids went to, they had at one point they had a very linear art teacher, and they were learning how to draw a portrait. And so it had to be exactly
Yeah. Yeah.
step by step, had to go as he instructed these kids how to make a drawing of a face. It's hilarious. My son has dyspraxia. That means his handwriting is,
Uh,
you can't read it. He cannot even read his own handwriting. And he's writing with his left hand, and he has dyspraxia. So when he starts
uh,
drawing, his
yeah.
fine motor skills are fucked up. So he couldn't go as instructed to draw that face exactly
Yeah.
as the art
Yeah.
teacher told him.
Yeah.
Stuart, he drew a face that was so cool. It was like Picasso, like weird. And he got a very bad grade. And I had to go to school and say, what the hell? This what you're teaching is not about art. And these are instructions, and you're teaching an art class, and art class is not about instructions. So I hope AI can shift this all way where we could just use that calculator of life that is AI and organize all these systems and knowledge together, and we teach kids and humans how to use that well, and learn them on the other side to do the opposite and to create the most beautiful things based
Mhm.
on nothing, basically.
Mhm. So I want to go into education, specifically group classes. Well, there's a couple different things that came to me when you were talking. It feels like the I have a shared emotional reaction to basically your son and you on this sense of like the handwriting and all these different things not being able to fit into the system. Part of me thinks that it's the group classes, so that you're, and I've taught enough group classes to understand that it's impossible to teach to every individual in the room, that you
Mhm.
must teach to the spirit of the group, not the individuals in the room. So part of it feels like that, that there's just like something about that Prussian model of education where everybody had to be in group. Because before that, how did education work? In my understanding, there was no education for most people except through maybe the churches and everything like that. But where the refined education was, where you had private tutors from the age of 4 to 18. And I know for myself, having tried to do the group classes and having then tried to do private tutoring, that private tutoring is just like way far above. And now with AI, I have a private tutor at my beck and call at all times who will never say that's a dumb question or
Nonstop.
throw
Yeah.
chalk at me.
Yeah.
Like those
Yeah.
those things just don't happen anymore, and like that's really beautiful. And I wonder how education is going to respond, because it feels like I'm sure they're going to respond. There's so many forms of education as well, but it just feels like there's going to be a radical shift, and it's not at all clear. I really like what you said about bringing the outside world in and forming it to the child, because now that seems very possible. It seems really possible to have a group class, but also have AI serve as an intermediary layer between a student and the group class, so that the
Yeah.
student is also able to have individualized education, even in a public school. Like it feels like all that stuff is coming.
Yeah. And you know what triggers me, Stuart, is that it's now, so there's group class, but it's also very individual. So it's your grade. And
Uh,
if you do your exam, like nobody can see what you're writing. And like,
yeah, yeah.
it's your grade, it's your paper. It's very individual. And now with AI, the teacher has become very individual. So the class can be open
Uh,
up again.
yeah.
That's how I feel when you talk about that. That we always talk in the Octopus Movement about the human mycelium and
Mm.
not the community. I hate the word community. I prefer the human mycelium, and it would be interesting to have a human mycelium in the classroom to connect, to really
Uh,
connect in that classroom with each other, with the teacher. Hey, maybe look at telepathy and bring telepathy into the classroom and play with that consciousness and see how you can connect. And
mm,
then you have the teaching of the algebra and math and whatever. That's supervised and helped with AI, which is very individual.
mm,
So
mm, mm,
you can mix kids together. Here in the Netherlands, you have all these layers. If this is your intelligence in how you learn, then you're in
mm,
this group or this group or that group. It's not mixed at all. But
mm, mm,
what my experience was at the international school where my kids went to, the beauty of the international school was the mix of cultures, the mix of
mm.
backgrounds, the mix of knowledge, the mix of intelligence, the mix of everything
Yeah.
that made these
And
kids
important. You
so
can't.
much better.
Yeah, you can't. Like when I was talking about the individualized thing, the school itself is for mixing, and something schools don't really do well is that they only mix among the cohort. So they establish a
Yeah.
cohort, and then everybody stays at the same with the same people from the same age, and that often goes off into life. Whereas like talking about bringing life in, it's just like when you go out in the world, you're experiencing all different sorts of generations that don't the modern school system doesn't really get to. I want to understand, how is the Dutch system different from the American system? I mean, there's a bunch of different American systems, as I imagine there's a bunch of Dutch systems. In general, like public school, is it? Would you describe that Dutch school system as innovative or as well done? Can you talk more about the Dutch system of school?
The Dutch system sucks big time. really. It's from the Stone Age, because they've done something really stupid. They've created a test. When you're before you go to middle school, you need to do a test, and that test determines what kind of middle school you're doing. So in the
Yeah.
US, middle school is middle school. In the Netherlands, not. There are
Whoa.
4 different kind of middle schools. And the middle school determines what your next path is after high school. And so you can only go to college, to university, if you have done the ultimate level in middle school and high school. So this one goes to university. So if you end up here because you have dyslexia
Yeah.
and you do
Yeah.
the test and it's all written and they don't fucking tell you what's happening there and you make a lot of mistakes, not because you're stupid, but just because it didn't go well. So you're stuck here and you're stuck here in the middle school, high school, and you cannot go to university unless you go from here to here to here.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard about the
It's
system in
crazy.
other cultures too. That's totally nuts. And the U.S. sort of saved me specifically because I failed through high school. I got my GED, which is general education diploma,
Yeah.
and then I ended up going and working for a bit before going. Then figuring out that there's this pathway that you can take in the U.S. where we can go into community college, and then those 2 years of community college can apply to any university that we want. And if I had been really thinking about it, I probably could have gotten into a really good school. I did get to a good enough school, but I could have gotten into Stanford or one of those by doing really well in those 2 years of community classes, basically. But that is something we figured out in the U.S. that is really helpful for getting around the problem that you just mentioned, because it's totally nuts. And it makes me think that the telepathy comment, like that all of this neurodivergence. Do you think that neurodivergence is something that we have only isolated once we had the thought forms that allowed us to isolate it? Or is it something that's been around for a long time? Or is it a recent evolutionary advantage or evolutionary thing that is preparing us for a future that looks very, very different from the past? Like there's almost like a group precognition of what's happening, and that's why
Hmm.
there's autism
That
and
would
other.
be nice.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
that's the case.
yeah.
Maybe we're removing our bones and shells that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Maybe we are, and it's nice to think about that. I don't know. I just know that what's her name again? I met her. She created the word neurodiversity.
Oh, interesting.
She's the Yes, she's the mother of neurodiversity. So her mother was bipolar, I think,
Uh,
and everything was fucked up in the household. And she was,
uh,
and to explain to the outside world what was happening, she needed
uh,
language in order to, you know, like it's not me, a lot of people who discover their own neurodiversity, they're so happy that it's not me, it's my dyslexia. Yeah, wait a second, your dyslexia is you, but okay.
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
so and that's relatively new, neurodiversity, right?
Mm,
she She's
mm-hmm.
still alive. I spoke with her. So how old is it? How old is the word neurodiversity? Are you Googling right now? I think, what is it, 40 years? Maybe it's 40 years old. Maybe it's 30 years old even. That's very young. Before that, it wasn't there. I was talking to a neuroscientist in Moscow. In Russia, they don't do neurodiversity. In China, they don't do neurodiversity. It doesn't exist. Of
Yeah.
course it exists, but it
Yes.
doesn't exist. So cool.
And there's no way to figure it out too. So yeah, 1998 by Judy Singer, Australian
Judy Singer. Yeah.
sociologist. Yeah,
Australia. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, yeah, it's a really it doesn't in the same way that we can't go back into hunter gatherers and understand what they were thinking because they left no documents, so we can't understand what they're thinking because we don't have the documentation. All we can do is put clues together and try to figure it out. So I like this idea that it's neurodiversity is new, but it's old at the same time is really interesting, and I want to investigate it. Any sort of thing. Okay, got a book here. What's this book? Nomads by Anthony Satin.
Please read.
Oh,
This is
okay,
so
great.
cool.
Yeah.
This is so cool. And I met Anthony. He was in the Octopus Movement to do a brain lunch about his book. It took him 6 years to write this book. And why so long? Because there are no monuments of nomads, right? So there are no monuments from the
Mhm.
nonlinear world in that perspective. And he's talking about this because the people that were nomads, the nomadic DNA is linked in his book to the ADHD DNA. So
Oh,
we have even we have the digital
DNA, interesting.
nomads, it's we can't sit still. Literally, we can't sit still. We need to explore, we need to keep moving. And he's writing so beautifully in this book that with the nomads, they created their space, and then 80% would go again, or 50%, and the rest would stay, and they would specialize and become a specialist and build a city and build monuments, and that's
That's
our
crazy.
history. But these fuckers that just went to the next
Kept on
thing and the
going.
next thing, and nobody was, they were not creating anything. So there's no history about that except this book. So beautiful,
Yeah,
so
that is definitely going to
powerful.
be. I'm going to read that book because so for my personal history, it's been really interesting because starting when I was 21, I started to go to other countries to study abroad in other countries and talk about sort of shock going to China for the first time and having all the rules that I understood from growing up in the West Coast of America, then just completely removed from under the tarp, and all of a sudden just like, oh, but it was healing as well because it was like
Mhm.
I could give up a lot of the things that I had thought were real about the nature of culture and everything. And so, but I became somewhat of a nomad only until I've landed up here in Buenos Aires, and now I feel like I've found my forever home, and I don't want to go anywhere. And it's partly because of aging as well. I think it's partly just because I'm getting older, and the constant moving around to new Airbnbs and all of the things in the environment are they're just chaos again. Like it goes back to chaos and like how much I actually want to deal with all of that chaos over. But I love this idea of nomads being part of the same culture as the people who ended up building cities, but they just didn't stop. So they just kept on going.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's a very interesting. Anything to say on any of those points that I just mentioned?
China, what was your biggest, can we talk about China
Sure.
for a
Yeah,
bit?
yeah,
I
yeah.
I
Absolutely.
lived in China for 3.5 years in
Yeah.
Beijing.
Okay.
I really loved it, talking about chaos,
Yeah.
talking about unexpected life changes, right? Um, what is your biggest thing you took with you from
Mm.
China?
That was the first place I went. So I read this book, uh, China Inc., which was a sort of a sequel to the book Japan Inc., which Japan Inc. was all in the 1980s and 1990s about Japan becoming this world power that's going to take over. And then China was the same thing. China Inc. was the same thing. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, they created a city called Shenzhen that was a fishing village in 1960s, 1970s, and then now is this massive modern city. And so I was like, okay, that's really interesting. I should go check that out. And so I did a study abroad program in Shanghai at Shanghai Dashui, which was the big university there in Shanghai. And I did it for a month, and I was learning Mandarin before that with a Taiwanese teacher. And she was teaching us Mandarin with the Taiwanese accent and all these different things. I get to Shanghai and realize that they speak a completely different dialect. And I was like, oh, I'll just give that up and party for a
Forget
month.
about everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I ended up partying for a month, which was like I loved it. It was wild because Shanghai is just such an interesting city because it's not only China but it's also international China. Like it has a long
Yeah.
history of being the place where all the international people go. So that was my first introduction to you. You said international school, like all that, the whole sort of. There's a group of nomads who just can go to all these different places, and so I kind of hooked into that. China itself is crazy because it's so different. They had such a hard time during the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. Uh, the language, it's just such a fascinating culture that I feel like even spending that month there, I'd been back a couple times. It's just and something I noticed, there's a lot of foreigners who would go there and really dive into that foreignness because it allows them to step out of Western culture in a way that's really stark. Um,
Mhm.
and but yeah, what did that answer the question? Do you have any follow-up questions? Or?
Yeah, I love that. You know, it's interesting to hear your perspective from China. Um, I think it was, and I was asking so I could tell about China as well,
Sure.
maybe.
Yeah. I want to
Please
hear it. I
ask
want to
me
hear
what.
Beijing for 3 years. Like that's crazy.
You know, the first thing I've learned in Beijing when I moved there, and I was working for a Chinese company,
Whoa.
and one of the first things I was interviewed by this Chinese dude, and he said, what do you like about China? And I said, Wu Wei. I think Wu Wei is really awesome.
Yeah.
And he was looking at me and like, oh, that's a funny answer. And and I was reading about Wu Wei in the plane and the whole explanation and that it was above the entrance of the Forbidden City
Whoa.
before Mao Zedong.
Whoa.
It used to say Wu Wei above
Whoa.
the entrance.
Because of
That's cool, huh?
Confucianism, or like how did
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah. And but now Mao Zedong hangs there, but it used to say Wu Wei above the entrance of the Forbidden City. As far as I know, you know, what do I know? I read about that,
Yeah.
and because I was so fascinated about Wu Wei. For those who don't know, Wu Wei is um, effortless effort. It's not about winning the game; it's about playing the game as beautiful as possible. Stuart, if that's not something that is so beautiful, that resonates so much with me. The whole story we have had so far is so close to Wu. Also, that you know, it's not about winning. It's
Yeah.
not about that these linear steps. It's about doing it as beautiful as possible. And the end result is that you probably win when you play the game very
Exactly.
beautifully.
Yeah.
And the more beautiful, the better. I find it so artistic.
Yeah.
I find that the art of life is so close to Wu Wei. I think, yeah, I'm super excited about that and try to use that in my own life as well. Sometimes you know, I'm stressed out and things are happening. And I'm like, Wu Wei, Perry, Wu Wei. Oh yeah, cool. And the other
The,
thing, what I really enjoyed in China as well, what I thought was interesting, is trust. I think we're
hmm.
doing it all wrong in the West. Yeah, from that perspective. So
Yeah.
here in the Netherlands, in my country, you meet someone and it's immediately, oh, I trust you, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and let's get into business together or let's create something together. But oh boy, if something goes wrong, right? Immediately, I don't trust you anymore. So the whole issue of trust is weird. I'm what does trust
Mm,
mean? And people it's so easy to talk about trust, but I'm always wondering, what does it really mean for you? Because in the West, I trust you, and then someone fucks up, I don't trust you anymore, and you get canceled, basically. In China, they don't trust you. And
nobody.
I find that a form of respect, right? It's they want to really get to know you. That's why you're getting all that baijiu and horrible stuff to drink, and they want to make sure you get drunk as fast as possible so they can see the real you. And
Yeah.
it takes
Interesting.
years and years, and then you got into their guangxi, and then there's trust. But Stuart, the most beautiful thing of Chinese trust is when you do mess up, when you do something wrong, it's okay.
Uh,
You're not getting canceled because you're doing something wrong, because you're in someone's guangxi. If you're
uh,
there, if you're in that group, in that protection, then even when you fuck up big time, it's not that it's not a problem, but
yeah.
it's not like here, I don't trust you anymore. We cancel you. They stick together in that way. And I think that's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to look at trust. And I get always a bit nervous when I meet people for the first time and they talk about trust immediately. And I'm like, uh-oh, red flag. You know, it's interesting. And I've learned these two things from China and a bunch of other things, but these two things really are close to me. And like it's interesting. It's
It's
interesting to see the
yeah.
world that way.
And it relates to San Francisco in this really interesting way because San Francisco is sort of like it is American, but then also it's sort of not American. There's a lot of things about the way that it works there. One thing that got me into a lot of trouble was the trust. because it is a high trust place, and you go and you can do a deal with a venture capitalist, and you can meet and then get money in the bank immediately. Like those things happen, and also at the same time, that's totally nuts because it's like you're basically involving yourself with this really intimate thing. And I think intimacy is a very misunderstood thing, particularly in business. Like business is really super intimate. And when you have money, it's like that makes it all the more intimate. And then this sort of just like, we're going to do it, all these different things. Like there's so many things that are strange about that area. And the big one is just trusting people immediately is a really strange thing. I kind of want to go back to the Wu Wei comment. So you're reading about Wu Wei on the plane, and then you're in a job interview with this guy, and you say Wu Wei. What was his response?
He loved it. Well, he was Wu Gang. His name was Wu Gang. He was absolutely wonderful. This is tiny little strong Chinese character, and we were doing the job interview, and he was laughing. I was saying stupid things, of course. I just came to China, and maybe this was after 2 or 3 weeks that I had the job interview. What do you know? You don't know anything, right?
Yeah.
Nothing. And what do you like about China? Wu Wei. He was cracking up. He said, "What? Wu Wei? Yeah, because of this." He said, "Oh, this is awesome." He said, "I've never had an interview with a foreigner who said, what do I like most about China? Wu Wei. It's always the food, the culture, and the history, beautiful things. Nobody has ever said Wu Wei." So he's cracking up, and we got into a very nice friendship. It was really, really cool working for him, and he I've learned so much. It was
Did you actually end up getting into the Guaxi category? Is it Guaxi? Well, how do you say it?
Guangxi. Well, not with him, but I had a friend in China, and I believe I got into her Guangxi.
Uh,
Um, I think so. Yes,
yeah,
but you never know. You never know in China. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not. This is also something we do. Like, Stewart, I have news for you. What, Perry? You're in my Guangxi now. Oh, really? Cool. Is there a WhatsApp group? Yeah, they don't do that kind of
Yeah, yeah.
shit. It's not like you're
Yeah, yeah,
now
yeah.
you can feel it. You're like, oh, I think I'm close now.
Explicit versus
Beautiful.
implicit, explicit versus
Yeah,
implicit. And I think
yeah.
in the Netherlands, in the northern countries, in Scandinavia, and England, and the United States, all share this sort of like uh, necessity of being somewhat explicit and not have, and the implicit kind of deeper understandings are like harder for us to track. I've noticed here in Argentina, it's really interesting because Argentina is such an has such a it's like a parallel universe to both the United States and to Brazil, and specifically the Brazil Argentina are similar to the southern colonies in the United States versus the northern colonies in the northern United States. Argentina is
Hmm.
closer to that northern colony basically, but it's like the edge of empire. So it's very much at the edge. And I had an Argentine guest on the podcast who just told me a lot about how things here just work much more implicitly. And here I'm trying to
Hmm.
get everybody to explicitly say things so that I can understand what's going on. And it's like not, it's against their nature. It is the other thing I love about entering other cultures is seeing whether I can adapt to that culture and not losing my culture in the process, but just adapting to my environment. I think is a very interesting, very octopus-like character, I would say.
Very
And,
octopus-like.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very octopus. And I also like to be the foreigner. I don't know how that's with you, but when you're talking about implicit, being the foreigner makes it a bit implicit as
Yes,
well. That
yes,
it's, oh, he's Dutch. Oh, it's there. Something happens in the energy.
yeah.
Like there's, oh, he's Dutch. You know, these people are stupid, or they're always very bold. So it's so nice not to be judged immediately because you're the foreigner, and
That's
people are
exactly it.
judging so much. And this is what I'm so proud of in the Octopus Movement, that we don't have any rules whatsoever. And I'm really trying not to judge. And people are there, and let nature take its course. And I think being a foreigner makes that easier because there are less specific expectations from the people around you. And that makes life more beautiful. And that makes me think that we need to learn something from that, and that we have too many explicit expectations from others, which we maybe should temper a little bit. We should do something with that.
So yeah, there's a lot of good points there. We can take it back to the alien comment on the octopus, maybe aliens, and the fact that foreigners, the other word for foreigner is alien, illegal
Yep.
alien, and it's the other relation is to Argentina and Buenos Aires specifically, is that Argentina is an immigrant culture like the United States, but contrary to the United States, which had to make a lot of changes to its immigration policy because it was such a destination for so many immigrants. Argentina never really had that after the first waves. So everybody is really welcoming to immigrants. Like you get put in that foreigner bucket, and the foreigner bucket is a very interesting bucket to be in because everybody like wants you to come there. And if you tell them that you're living in Argentina, they're like, "Oh man, I love you!" Like, well, yeah, please come and everything like that. And it also because the first place that I noticed this was in China, but then after that I noticed it in Thailand. In Thailand, the foreigner bucket is really beautiful, but at the same time, you'll never be Thai. You'll never actually become Thai. You'll always be a foreigner. You'll always be a Farang. In Argentina, there's this beautiful thing of being put into that bucket, but you can actually become an Argentine. So there's this really beautiful international foreigner scene here where everybody has these really big challenges of trying to immigrate and trying to get these residencies and do all these things. So it creates a great in-group bond for all the foreigners. But then the Argentines are really welcoming all the time as well. And it's just like the best of both worlds in my personal opinion.
The foreigner bucket, so cool.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And it's almost like the alien bucket, and that's what we're doing. So you're giving me a total different perspective on what is the octopus movement. It's actually an alien bucket. It's you're a foreigner in your own country.
Yes,
You're a
yes,
foreigner in
exactly.
your own culture. You're a
Yeah,
foreigner in your own family, and rather
yeah,
fighting that and thinking that it's something bad, it's actually something very cool. It doesn't have to do with superpowers. It has to do with human intelligence. That's
yeah,
cool. The
yeah.
circle
Well,
is round, Stuart.
yeah, yeah. Circles around exactly, and it relates to artificial intelligence. I've over the last two weeks, and with all of the crazy things that have come up, I'm just going to start referring it more and more as alien intelligence because it is an alien intelligence in terms of this bucket. Like some of the things it's doing for the coding thing are just like I can't. This brings to mind. Maybe we can do it in a future conversation about theory of mind. Is that and actually very related to neurodivergence as well? Is that how do you evaluate an intelligence that is greater than our own? And I don't mean to say
Yeah.
greater in any sort of prescriptive way, because it's like just like a functional difference, that a qualitative difference. Like, how do you actually evaluate an intelligence that's far more different,
You
that far
don't.
more divergent? You don't. Yeah, like how you can't do it.
You don't,
Yeah.
right? Like the mycelium, I think that's a very intelligent species system.
Hmm.
We're not looking at that kind of. It's interesting, Stuart. We need to dive into that in how we see that kind of intelligence. That as soon as the intelligence goes beyond us, we're not talking about intelligence anymore.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
like never mind. We're not talking about it because the intelligence of the mycelium of
Yeah.
nature, it's
It's beyond
so
our.
unbelievable. There's
Yeah.
another book. Sorry, I love books.
Go for it.
There
Go
is
for it.
another book. Audience, please. Finding the Mother Tree is just really so beautiful. It is about that mycelium, and it explains how intelligent the networks of nature is,
Mm.
and how the support is organized in nature itself. It is something we can learn a lot from. It's
Mm.
very intelligent. It's not even close in what we're
I,
doing. It's unbelievable.
I love this frame as well, because regardless of the artificial intelligence, the alien intelligence, the intelligence of the natural world is also in many ways beyond our ability to evaluate. We have science, and science can get a lot of it, and science has gotten a lot of it. But there's also a lot of things that we don't understand yet, which are really
Yeah.
exciting.
And now we're trapped in, if it's not backed up by science, we don't believe it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's not really intelligence, is it?
No, it's
When you start thinking
ideology.
about it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Cool.
ideology. Um,
Cool.
well, thank you so much for coming on the show. How can our listeners find out more about you and the Octopus Movement?
www.theoctopusmovement.org. Please come to the website, hang out with us. It's all for free. It's fun. Come into the human mycelium. You will find a link to connect with me on pickmybrain.world, and then you can book me for 20 minutes on a Zoom. I love these human connections. We can chat about things, connect about things, and see how we can connect even more dots. That's how they can do it. Theoctopusmovement.org. We have an app. Holy shit. I forgot to talk about the app,
Sure.
Stewart.
Go
Okay.
for it. Let's go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me.
2 minutes. We've created an app called tellTom.ink. And telltom is such a fun app. It's an app where people can complain, and that's all it does. So you log in, you complain, you share your ink, you share your bitch. And you just go there and you leave. It's not social media. It's not about likes. It's not about who is inking the most, has the most frustration. All the frustration in the world comes into a database, and we work with that. We have think tanks of all these nonlinear thinkers, and ideas itself, for me, is empty in a way. An idea is always based on thought again. So just an idea, if you don't do anything, is then nothing happens. Frustration is more interesting. It
Mm.
is more
Mm.
human. And if you bring in the frustration together, and you can see what's happening in the world and countries and the bigger picture, and you combine all that data, you can
Mm.
really understand much better what's going on. And if you understand much better what's going on, it's easier to create a solution to a problem. So that's why
Mm.
we've created tellTom.ink. And now people can complain about everything, but also kids. The app is there starting at the age of 4 plus to whatever age, and everybody can complain whatever they want to complain about. If it's about your neighbor or your spouse who is making a mess at home, it doesn't matter to us. And there's no win. You just get it out of your system. It feels good. Like, oh, I'm sharing it here. And you write it down and you get it out of your system, and it's gone. And it's anonymous. Nobody knows you wrote this frustration.
That's very cool. And there's somebody who reminds me of who I'll let you know after we finish recording. But the octopusmovement.org and telltom.ink. Is that right?
.ink, yeah. And of course, the ink, octopus, right? You get it right. Yeah.
Oh, telltom.ink.
And tellTom,
I-N-K.
yeah. Not
Okay.
INC. Ink,
Okay.
inking. So ink from a pen, from an octopus.